Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Devonna Herinque if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today, I am joined by our AL.com reporter, Paul Gattis, and Paul is here today to explain something that is starting today, and that is a trial between Roy Moore and accuser Leigh Corfman over a defamation lawsuit. Now, we're going to get into all of the ins and outs here and kind of remind you of the case, but I want to take 1 second before we get into some of the nitty-gritty details here, Paul, and kind of remind people about what this case exactly is about. Now, you might remember back in 2017, which feels like a century ago, right after the pandemic and over the last few years, 2017, we had that special Senate election between Doug Jones and Roy Moore. Leigh Corfman was one of several women that came out about a month before that election and made claims against Roy Moore that he had made sexual advances on her when she was 14 years old in 1979, and he was 32 years old as an assistant district attorney. Fast forward to after that election in December 2017, in January 2018, Leigh Corfman filed a lawsuit of defamation against Roy Moore, saying that when he came out defending himself, he defamed her in the process. Paul, that's a very watered down version of what this is about. But there is a lot of details here. And again, it feels like this was so long ago that I think some people have probably thought, oh, well, surely that has been solved and that has been adjudicated by this point.
Well, the lawsuit was filed January 4th, 2018. So we are just a shade over 4 years since this lawsuit has been filed. And that is a long time, and it's compounded, of course, like you said, by the pandemic. But we all know that the justice system in the U.S. does not necessarily move at a particularly fast speed. So here we are 4 years later. I guess the remarkable thing to me is it's unusual for such high profile lawsuits to actually end up going to trial. It seems like generally there's settlement negotiations and an out of court settlement reached that we may not ever really know about. But from my understanding, there was never really any negotiations between the two sides to settle this. I mean, both sides they wanted to be in a courtroom, and 4 years later, here we are.
Well, that's a good point here. And also, something I want to make extremely clear is this is not a criminal trial. There is not a criminal trial happening about Leigh Corfman's allegations on Roy Moore. This is not a sexual misconduct trial. There's nothing criminal about this trial. This is a civil trial. And this is from Leigh Corfman saying that Roy Moore defamed her after he came out and said that she was a liar, among other things, after those allegations came to light. So, Paul, why don't you tell us exactly what Leigh Corfman's lawsuit here is about? Because I think when we see defamation lawsuit, most people would assume that Roy Moore was the one suing Leigh Corfman for defamation.
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, you make a very good point, and that's something that needs to be understood from the top. This is not a matter of whether Roy Moore did what he was accused of doing or whether he didn't do it. This is the aftermath of those allegations being made. So in early November of 2017, about a month before the special election, Leigh Corfman and some other women made some allegations to the Washington Post. I suppose maybe the most serious of those were made by Corfman. And then, so now Roy Moore, he's still out on the campaign trail, and he has to answer these allegations. So in responding to these allegations in a public setting, he is denying that they ever took place. He is denying that he ever knew the women. And there was one particular campaign speech in Henniger about 2 or 3 weeks after the allegations first came out, where he came out and said, I don't even know any of these women. And at that point, Leigh Corfman, with the help of her lawyers, put together an open letter to Roy Moore, basically that says, hey, look, you did this. Stop telling people that I'm lying. Stop telling people that you don't know who we are, because you do. And it continued. And sort of the final straw was, if you remember, it was a very close election. Doug Jones won the election by less than 2% of the vote. Roy Moore filed a lawsuit to stop the certification of the election results. And in that lawsuit, he described Corfman's allegations as false and malicious. And at that point, apparently that was just the final straw for Corfman. A week after that lawsuit was filed, Corfman filed her lawsuit for defamation. False and malicious was like in the second sentence. So that's where we are now. That's the defamation from Corfman's point of view. Now, about 4 months after this, Roy Moore countersued, and he also sued for defamation, which makes seem to be a little bit more obvious because of the allegations that she made against him. And so, basically, what we have here, we have dueling lawsuits, and they are both going to be heard at the same time before a jury this week in Montgomery.
I'm glad the way that you put that, Paul, because it's so right. These are both lawsuits that are basically over the same thing, and they're basically making the same claims. It's just against each other. So both of those lawsuits are going to be heard this week in front of a judge. And again, this is jury selection today. Jury will be seated hopefully sometime here pretty soon in the next day or so. And then this trial will get underway. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I think is also worth repeating, and that is that these defamation lawsuits, especially with high-profile people, don't typically go to trial. They are typically settled out of court, sometimes very privately and in a way that the media or people who have access to court records cannot actually even see the settlement agreement. This one, though, wasn't settled. Both of these parties wanted to go to court, prove their case in court. Also, something you mentioned that I think bears repeating was that Leigh Corfman's allegations was one of the probably arguably the most serious of those that came to light in November 2017. And that is probably because Leigh Corfman was the youngest of those accusers who came forward. She was 14 at the time. Again, she says that Roy Moore, who was then 32 in the time of 1979, was an assistant district attorney. And she actually came forward with a pretty detailed narrative of what she said these sexual advances were. And she also provided some interesting scenarios there, I should say, where she said that she met him while she was in court. He was an assistant district attorney in that same courthouse. He was sitting with her while I believe her mother was in court over a custody hearing. So she provided some pretty concrete evidence there that her team would call evidence for people to go back and fact check if they wanted to look. 1979, he was an assistant district attorney. So she thought she had very concrete claims there. Now, again, Roy Moore came out and very vehemently denied these claims and also said that they were malicious and that people were trying to take him down right before the election. So there's just a lot going on both sides here. So, Paul, what do we expect about this trial? I know we're in jury selection today, but what do we expect after the jury is seated?
Well, it figures to be pretty interesting. If you are interested in this type of thing, I mean, it figures to get down into some details that may be a little uncomfortable, some subject matter that may be a little uncomfortable. There figures to be a lot of political aspects to this too, given the damage that Roy Moore would be trying to prove that he suffered as a result of these allegations. He maintains, and I can't necessarily go back and quote it, but this sounds pretty accurate, that the polls had him ahead by about 10 points when these allegations came out, and he subsequently lost the election. That's a pretty impressive fall to be that far ahead and then lose. There's more than 50 people on the witness list. As someone who's going to be in the courtroom covering this, it would be fine with me if all 50 something are not called, because that would make it for a particularly long trial. But my best understanding is that it could go up to about 2 weeks. And so, it could be pretty lengthy, and that's just from the testimony standpoint. And then you get into the jury deliberation, and how long might that take? And then once the jury reaches a verdict, then they may want to discuss damages that they may want to be awarded. But so it's going to be a lot of it could be a lot of uncomfortable content based on the allegations in the lawsuit by Corfman. A lot of political discussion based on Roy Moore being in that Senate race. So it figures to be kind of interesting.
Well, and you mentioned something again that was, I think, important to repeat is that Roy Moore, before these allegations came out in November 2017, he was ahead by, I think it was 11 points from Doug Jones. And then fast forward a month and he loses that election. Now, he has said since, and I don't have the exact words to quote him, as you said, Paul, but he has said since this cost him the election. These accusations from Leigh Corfman and the other women cost him this election. So it effectively ended, at least for a period, his political career. He has been a long time name around Alabama in politics, in the law, and he has not held a public office since that accusation, since they came out and since that failed Senate bid. So there is a lot of politics at play here. And there's also, as you mentioned, a lot of uncomfortable accusations from Leigh Corfman. Now, we know this is not a criminal trial. This is not something that is going to try to prove if these sexual advances happened, if they didn't happen, but of course they will come up because that's at the root of the defamation case, is what Leigh Corfman says happened to her when she was 14. So you say uncomfortable, there's this whole thing is going to be uncomfortable, right? You've got the story about, again, her being 14 and him being 32, the claims she says happened, and then you've also fast forward to this political race that was nasty in a lot of different ways. And then you've got the uncomfortable truth about politics. So those are going to be two very uncomfortable kind of themes meeting each other in that courtroom. So Paul, I know that you are going to be keeping us updated on AL.com with this, but before I let you go, I want to ask you, this is a civil lawsuit. What does either party want to get out of this? What are they looking to win?
Well, as far as Corfman goes, now the lawsuit did not specify a monetary amount that she was seeking. It said that she wanted a public apology for Roy Moore, which, I mean, I don't really necessarily know the value of that. It said that she wanted a declaration that Roy Moore did indeed defame her, and it said, and whatever damages may be appropriate. So this morning in court, Corfman's lawyers said they are not interested in any, in winning any kind of monetary damages. They've even dropped the demand for a public apology from Roy Moore. Now they still want that vindication of a jury saying, yes, Roy Moore, you did defame her, which is probably about as close as you could possibly get to a third party saying, yes, these events actually took place. From Roy Moore's perspective, he also did not ask for any specific monetary amounts in his counter lawsuit, and his lawyer said today that they would just accept whatever the jury found to be appropriate. I think probably on both sides, as far as money, they would like the other side to pay for their legal expenses in pursuing this case. But I think a jury would pretty much have to go off the grid to come back with some eye-popping monetary damage to be awarded, because neither side really appears to be asking for that.
Well, there's a lot of things at play here. I know, again, you are going to Montgomery to go through this trial, to sit through it and to report on it for us. It's important to note as well, I don't think we noted, that this is taking place in Montgomery. It is not taking place in Etowah County, where Leigh Corfman alleges that these sexual advances happened, and also where Roy Moore is from, and I believe still lives. So this is not happening in Etowah County. This is happening in Montgomery. So Paul, I know you're headed down to Montgomery here in a little bit. Our own Matt Kaysen is there covering jury selection right now. So everybody, if you're interested in this, make sure that you pay attention to AL.com this week, and probably several weeks out from today as well, as this trial goes on, for Paul's reporting. So Paul, thank you again for breaking this down for us, and everybody watching, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.